Good morning, welcome back to the shop. Today we're going to be building a workbench. I've been working off of sawhorses in here for a while and it's time to get a workbench installed. So we got some oak 2x lumber here that we cut off our mill here. And we got a bunch of 2x4s we're going to cut up. I'm going to make a series of legs and then we'll set those up and put the workbench on top of that. The whole thing will be made out of 2-inch lumber. Mostly oak. There's a little bit of cherry mixed in. Here we're cutting the legs to length. We got all the legs cut, and then we'll cut the top pieces and we'll end up notching those in, as you'll see here in a bit. We cut a 45 bevel on the end of the top piece just to make it look a little nicer, and when you walk up to it, there's less chance of hitting your leg on it. Here we're notching the legs out to accept the cross pieces. If the legs are notched and the cross pieces are notched into them like that, it makes it a lot stronger because you have actual wood to wood connection instead of just relying on the nails. They were taking a skill saw and making a series of cuts through there. And then we'll take a chisel and chisel it out and make a nice slot for our 2x to sit in. If you have a bunch of these to do and they're all the same, you can line them up, mark them all at the same time, and cut them all at the same time. It saves a lot of time in the long run. Here we're assembling the legs, or the top piece there with the angle cut on it and then notched into the legs there. We'll go ahead and put one nail per joint and then get it squared up and put the other nail in. Because after you get 2 nails in a joint like that, it doesn't move anymore. We're using 4-inch nails we got from Tractor Supply. I've had some comments about people wondering why I don't use screws for some of this stuff. And if you ever try to pull out one of these nails, you understand why. They don't come out very easy at all. They have ring shanks on them, so they're really solid, and they're about 1/3 of the price of screws. Here we're making sure it's square before we get it all locked in. After we got these made, we set them up, fasten against the back wall, and put a 2x10 on top of it there. Here we're notching out for our chop saw to sit in. I wanted the saw to sit down lower than the workbench so the table of the chop saw is the same height as the workbench. So we had to cut a notch out of the back of it here to accept the saw. even with a sharp blade and a Bosch jigsaw, it takes a bit to cut through this 2-inch oak. It's a lot harder than like your regular pine or fir would be, but it makes a much stronger workbench too. Cut the one side and you flip the piece over and trace it to get your other side, and you'll have symmetrical sides. We could have just cut the whole thing in half, but by leaving that piece in the back, it keeps your workbench tied together. I think it makes it stronger. Took a router and beveled the edge there so it looks a little nicer. Now we're going to grab our chop saw and see how it fits in there. I made the lower part of the bench there a little bit lower than I needed to, just in case in the future I get a different chop saw and it's a little bit different height. We can make that a little bit lower, then shim the saw to the right height. Here I'm just figuring out where exactly the saw should be for the back to clear with the sawdust tube coming out the back there. You got to make sure you have enough room for that. So if you measure from the back there, you can see where the stop on your workbench should be. Here's the front support for the chop saw going in. Here again, we just used, I think these are 5-inch nails we drove in from the end there. Later on, I put a little block underneath it to help support it, but it seems to be pretty solid. Making a hole for the chop saw to sit in. That was cool. Good. Just good. Get it lined up just perfect there. Those nails take some beating to get in too. They get a little harder than a regular 16-penny nail, but they don't come out either. We'll test our saw again to make sure the holes line up for the bolts to bolt it down. We put an outlet right behind the saw there. It'll make a clean installation when it's done. Here we're just measuring again to make sure it's right, because it's something you want to make sure is right. You don't want to have to move it after you make it. This is fairly rough cut lumber, so you have to make sure the ends are square before you pull measurements and stuff. We're trimming the end off here, and then we're going to rip it to the right width to fit behind the chop saw fence. I have to say that Makita saw does really well. I had a cheapo for a few years that worked okay, but it finally quit. And I bought a Makita for not a lot more money. Just a way more solid saw. It works a whole lot better. When you're ripping 2-inch oak, you gotta have a real saw. There we got it cut. Now we'll fit it in place. I had to cut one for each side of the saw there, a long one and a short one. There you can see how it fits right behind the fence on the saw, or actually 2 inches behind, because we'll have a 2-inch board on edge. That'll be the front of that board will be flush with the front of the saw. There again, when those nails go in, they're not coming out. There's our stopper board that'll fit right by the saw there. When you put a board on the workbench, it'll slap up against that. You'll have a nice straight edge. That's a 6-inch nail, if I remember right. And there's the first board for the front of the workbench. Get it positioned in there. It had a little bump on it. I'm not sure what happened, but there's a small bump on the front, so we shaved that off to make it fit in there a whole lot better. Took the rough edges off of it there a little bit. This stuff is pretty dry. It was actually a dead tree. It's been dead for a long time, but it seemed like it still had a little bit of moisture in it, so I want to make sure things fit really tight, because there's a chance it'll shrink a little bit. So we tried to make it fit as tight as we can. Here we're on the other side of the workbench. We got our backer board cut for there, nailing it down in place. I had just enough 6-inch nails to last. I actually had to straighten up a bent one that we found to get enough nails to nail this piece down. But you pretty much need a 6-inch to go through. It's a 3-inch board we're going down through, so you have 3 inches in the board and 3 inches down into the leg of the workbench. That needs to be really solid. And there's the first board of the front of the workbench. Get it in there nice and flat. And that'll plane right across the saw there. So you can just, when you're shoving lumber around, it'll just move right across there, no problem at all. Makes a nice solid work surface. Got some sparks off of that one. Board had just a little bit of a bow in it, not much at all. Got it pushed back here as tight as we can. There again, screws might have been a better idea than nails back there. Nails what I have on hand. The screws that I would want to use for this cost about $1.50 a piece from where I could find them. So we're just gonna use nails for now and see how they hold up. If y'all have any suggestions of improvements I can make in the shop here, or any suggestions for videos in the future, feel free to comment down below and we'll see what we can do. We read all the comments and we really appreciate all the time y'all put into watching these videos. Hopefully they're educational, entertaining, and y'all get something out of it. Thanks for watching. We really appreciate all the subscribers and all the time y'all give us watching these videos. And yeah, I think that's about all the time we have for today. So y'all have a good day, and we'll catch you on the next video. Thanks for watching.